I had talked yesterday about the notion of the resurrection of Jesus being part and parcel with the earliest beliefs of Christians. I mean, one can trace this back to as early as about 33 AD or so, within 3 years of the crucifixion. I want to talk today about how the apostles arrived at this idea. We basically have three options. Um, were they frauds? Were they honestly just, did they come together and say, let's, what, let's make something of it, even though boss is gone, let's make something of it anyway. Let's spread this message far and wide. So were they frauds? Were they deluded? Did they seriously believe they saw him, but it was somehow some kind of a hallucination, or this or that, or who knows? Um, or did they really, truly see a risen Jesus Christ? So today I want to talk about, were they frauds? Um, you know, just on the surface, first off, if you read their writings, the writings of Peter, the writings of Paul, the writings of John, James in the New Testament, this is the backbone that much of Western civilization is built upon. The morality preached by these men that came from Jesus. I just have a hard time seeing just in all of the exhortations, that these men are encouraging people, all the stuff that they're encouraging people to do and not do, I have a hard time believing that, charlatans were indeed saying these things. But maybe they were. So it all comes down to brass tacks. These men, you know, were martyred for their faith. I want to take a look at a couple of their martyrdom accounts. Now, there are a lot of later accounts. I think some are quoted in Origen, Origen, the early church father. And I'm not in a big hurry to touch on those. We're getting a little bit far removed from the date. Origen's right around 250. Eusebius, the church historian, he's into the 300s. That's a little far removed from my taste. I'm not in a big hurry to count those as authoritative. I want to let's go, let's say, within 30 years of the deaths of Peter and Paul. We have First Clement, um, writing from Rome in around 95 A.D. thereabouts, and here's what he talks about what happened to Peter and Paul. He's talking about envy and the sad state in the church in Corinth that he's writing to. All this hideous envy that's going on. I guess he was helping out with an issue that was going on in Corinth. And he had said, he's going on throughout the Old Testament, all the cases of envy, and that, some people died because of envy, because an envious person murdered them or put them through hell. Then he goes on in chapter 5. He's like, well, let's not dwell upon ancient examples. Let's come to more recent spiritual heroes. Let's look upon the noble examples furnished in our own generation. Through envy and jealousy, two of the most righteous pillars have been persecuted and put to death. Let us set before our own eyes the illustrious apostles, Peter, who through unrighteous envy endured not one or two, but numerous labors, and when he had at length suffered martyrdom, departed to the place of glory due to him. Owing to envy, Paul had also obtained the reward of patient endurance, after being 7 times thrown into captivity, compelled to flee, and stoned. After preaching both in the East and the West, he gained the illustrious reputation due to his faith, having taught righteousness to the whole world. And come to the extreme limit of the West, he suffered martyrdom under the prefects. Thus he was removed from the world and went to the holy place, having proved himself a striking example of patience. So, definitely there is a pretty clear example within about 30 years of them actually dying, maybe even within 25, Clement writing from Rome, talking about the hideous fate that befell them. I kind of doubt that Peter and Paul, if they were charlatans, would have gone to that fate. Let's talk about another person mentioned in the First Corinthians Creed who saw Jesus. We're talking about his brother James, who originally didn't believe that he was that Jesus was really much of anything when he was walking the earth. Um, Yet he became a believer too. Um, I have a hard time seeing how someone like James, who thought his brother was just some zealous dreamer and some fraudulent Messiah, would, after his death, if he didn't appear to him, all of a sudden become a believer in him. And let's look at the account of the end of James' life. There's an account in Josephus, the Jewish historian, um, where he talks about how he was stoned by the Jews. Um, Now, adding to that, Eusebius, he takes a record from a writing of the church father Hegesippus. Hegesippus was from around 130 or so, and Clement of Alexandria. Um, he talks about what happened leading up to the death of James. He said, "They came therefore in a body to James," now this is the Jews, said, "We entreat you, restrain the people, for if they are gone astray in their opinions about Jesus, as if he were the Christ, we entreat you to persuade all who have come hither for the day of Passover concerning Jesus. For we all listen to your persuasion, since we as well as the people bear your testimony that you are just, and you show partiality to no one. Do you therefore persuade the people not to entertain the erroneous opinions concerning Jesus, for all the people and we also listen to your persuasion. Take your stand, then, upon the summit of the temple, that from that elevated spot you may clearly be seen, and your words may plainly be audible to the people. For in order to attend the Passover, all the tribes have congregated here, some of the Gentiles too. To the scribes and Pharisees' dismay, James boldly testified that Christ himself sits in heaven at the right hand of the great power, and shall come on the clouds of heaven. The scribes and Pharisees then said to themselves, We have not done well in procuring this testimony to Jesus. But let us go up and throw him down, and they may be afraid and not believe him. And so they threw the just man down and began to stone him, for he was not killed by the fall. But he turned and kneeled down and said, I beseech you, Lord God our Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And while they were stoning him to death, one of the priests, the son of Rechab, the son of Rechabin, to whom testimony is borne by Jeremiah the prophet, began to cry aloud, Cease what you do, this just man is praying for us. But one of them, one of the rulers, took the staff which he had accustomed to wring out the garments he died, and hurled it at the head of the just man. And so he suffered martyrdom. They buried him on the spot. The pillar erected to his memory still remains close by the temple. This man was a true witness to both the Jews and Greeks that Jesus is the Christ. So there's another instance. James sure seemed to believe that his big brother had died and had risen from the dead, and was indeed the Jewish Messiah. One more. I want to talk about the Apostle John. Now, there is a very early tradition, and this comes from Tertullian, that he was plunged unhurt in boiling oil, and then got thrown out of the empire to go to Patmos. It's mentioned in the Prescription Against Heretics, chapter 36, where he's basically encouraging the heretics, hey, go to an apostolic church where the apostles preached. Go to Rome, go to Philippi, go to Ephesus. And he's like, that's where the Apostle John, who was thrown into water, or excuse me, thrown into boiling oil, and came out unharmed. Just real quick with that, if that's true, what can I say? I mean, the man was miraculously preserved from being boiled alive. He refused to give up his testimony. He especially at his age, it was probably in the 90s at that point. All of his apostolic bros were gone, and this was perpetrating a fraud. I think he'd just say, you know what, forget about it. But he didn't. He went, was willing to go to his death, and ultimately got exiled on the island of Patmos. Even if that didn't happen, assuming that that's a legend, nevertheless, at the end of his life, he was willingly exiled for being a Christian to some jerkwater island, where he had the vision of the Book of Revelation. So, were these men frauds? Based on this evidence, I kind of doubt it.